A new Gallup poll now shows Americans are more conservative, even on social issues like abortion, than they have been in a decade. From strong limits on abortion, parental consent, and bans on tax-funded abortions, Democrats in the White House disagree with the American people. While legacy media hide the unlimited abortion caused by Roe, President Biden continues trying to sell abortion as something good for the soul of America. A suburban Los Angeles news outlet is picking up on opposition to plans for a new local Planned Parenthood. The Fontana Herald News says early planning is generating controversy. The abortion myth is that abortion, the elimination of children, can somehow fill a need in Fontana for more health care. One protest sign reads, "In a war against children, have courage, choose life." This is Life News Radio. The View. The accurate view of the human person changes everything. The news you hear and see pertaining to the human person has the power to inform or misinform your opinions and what you do with the gift of life and what you allow your government to do. It's why we at this station offer news on the life issue. We hope you carefully assess what you hear, read, and view. Last November, Lori Chavez de Remer flipped a U.S. House seat in Oregon by promising to support even a heartbeat abortion ban. De Remer announced Friday she will not support an abortion funding ban in Congress. Catholic Vote says it will now support any credible challenger for her seat in 2024. The center of her district is a strong Catholic and evangelical Christian area around Mount Angel, Oregon. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for June 13th. Today we celebrate Saint Anthony of Padua. Anthony longed to be one of those closest to Jesus by dying for the faith. From his home in Portugal, he entered the Franciscan order and set out to preach to the Moors in Spain. However, an illness prevented Anthony from achieving his goal, so he sailed instead to Italy, where he was stationed in a small hermitage. There he spent most of his time praying, reading the scriptures, and doing humble tasks. At an ordination where no one was prepared to speak, the humble and obedient Anthony hesitantly accepted the task. Anthony's sermon was astounding to those who expected something rough and unprepared. He became recognized as a great man of prayer, as well as a great scripture and theology scholar. After leading the friars in northern Italy for 3 years, Anthony made his home in Padua, where he died in 1231. Popular devotion has nominated Anthony as finder of lost objects, but he also could be the patron of those who find their lives completely uprooted and set in new and unexpected directions. He is a perfect example of turning one's life completely over to Christ. There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests.
The essence of the demonic is the anti-cross, and all that means. It means sin. It means redemption. It means glorification. It means a resurrection. It means an eternal peace and joy. But not the cross. So we have even movements in the church today where we have the Spirit without a Calvary. No mention of a cross or of discipline. Just the celebration.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet There is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. It's going to be a great show today. We're going to have two incredible guests. Guest number one, Dr. Thomas Williams, has a book called The Coming Crisis, out with Sophia Institute Press. We're going to have a conversation about the current crisis of martyrdom happening. In fact, there's a story today in the news. A priest killed in Nigeria. I'll be sharing that with you this hour. But things are pretty bad in some parts of the world. But what about the rest of the world? What can we expect? And how does this compare to times gone by, say the 1st and 2nd century? Are things heating up? Well, Dr. Thomas Williams is going to conversate about that in the 15 past guest segment. Do join us for that if you can. At 30 past the hour, though, we're going to have a conversation with Father Robert Nixon. He is a co-host of a podcast published by Tan Books called the Spiritual Masters Podcast. We're going to be talking about the Imitation of Christ. Have you read the Imitation of Christ? Not only have I read it, I was paid to narrate it into audio book form some 12 years ago or so. I don't recommend my version of it, by the way. It was the most painful thing that I think I've ever done in my life. It was so difficult to get through. And I've been through Marine Corps boot camp, so let that sink in. So we're going to have a conversation about the Imitation of Christ and Thomas Kempis at 30 past the hour. Lots of stories, of course, to share with you. We'll be linking to everything we talk about in the show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Let's pray. Let's begin. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful, O Mother of the Word incarnate. Despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day.
Saint Anthony of Padua, pray for us. Anthony was born with the name Ferdinand in 1195 to a noble family in Lisbon, Portugal. At a young age, he entered the Augustinian order and was soon ordained a priest. But 10 years later, he left the Augustinians to become a Franciscan, originally hoping to die a martyr's death by preaching to the Saracens. He took the name Anthony in honor of the great St. Anthony the Abbot, patron of the chapel in which the later Anthony received his Franciscan habit. Anthony eventually ended up in Italy, where he maintained a quiet and humble demeanor despite his deep theological education. At one point, however, he was prevailed upon to preach, and stunned the congregation and his fellow friars with his erudition. From there on, he gained renown as a preacher, particularly against the heresies of his day. He also worked many miracles, including the purification of poisoned food by a simple sign of the cross, the example of a hungry donkey refusing oats and instead kneeling before the Blessed Sacrament in Anthony's hands to demonstrate the true presence, and the famous Sermon to the Fishes near Padua. On at least one occasion, he bilocated during a sermon in order to sing a lesson in a neighboring monastery. His success in defeating heresy and converting souls earned him the nickname the Hammer of Heretics. His accomplishments are all the more impressive for the fact that he died at just 36 years of age on June 13, 1231. Children ran through the streets crying out, "The saint is dead," and Anthony was indeed canonized the very next year by Pope Gregory IX. At the exhumation of the body about 30 years later, St. Bonaventure found St. Anthony's tongue perfectly preserved, as if still ready to preach another mighty sermon. The patronages of this beloved saint are far too many to list today. St. Anthony of Padua, pray for us.
And now your headline news. The Daily Wire reports Catholic Health Network Hospital receives millions for sex change surgery robot. A hospital affiliated with the largest Catholic health network in the country received millions of dollars for a robot that assists with transgender sex change operations, according to a new report from the Lepanto Institute. St. Francis Memorial Hospital, which is located in San Francisco, California, is part of the Dignity Health Network. In 2019, Dignity Health merged with Catholic Health Initiative to become Common Spirit Health, the largest Catholic health network in America. The network includes numerous hospitals, including St. Francis Memorial Hospital, that perform medical interventions that intend to change people's sex. The hospital even produced a YouTube video with a trans-identifying individual who underwent a sex change operation at St. Francis Memorial Hospital. The video promotes sex change surgeries as a way to, quote, live your authentic self, close quote. Yikes, talk about lies. Breitbart reports, JP Morgan Chase settles with Jeffrey Epstein's alleged victims for $290 million. An unnamed victim known as Jane Doe 1 filed the class action lawsuit on behalf of more than 40 women. She claimed that for years the bank ignored red flags pointing to Epstein's sexual abuse of women and children. After servicing him for 15 years, the bank severed ties with Epstein back in 2013, 5 years after Epstein was convicted of procuring a child for prostitution. The bank said the settlement is not an admission of guilt. However, they do regret their association with Epstein. The bank also faces a lawsuit by the United States Virgin Islands alleging that the bank knew of the multimillionaire's illicit activity on the island. The trial is set for October 23rd. The National Post is reporting nuclear states modernize their weapons. Chinese arsenal is growing. The world's nuclear powers, and China in particular, increased investment in their arsenals for a third consecutive year in 2022 amid swelling geopolitical tensions, two reports showed Monday. The world's 9 nuclear-armed states jointly spent $82.9 billion on their arsenals last year, with the United States accounting for more than half of that, according to a new report from the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN. As for China, the size of the country's nuclear arsenal has increased from 350 warheads in January 2022 to 410 in January 2023 and is expected to keep growing. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth. But if salt loses its taste, with what can it be seasoned? It is no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a mountain cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. It is set on a lampstand where it gives light to all in the house. Just so, your light must shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your heavenly Father." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Cornelius a Lapide, in his great commentaries, said this, "So too does a priest come to naught if he be too accommodating to people of the world. Let him remember that he ought to be salt and persevere in his vigor, gravity, and liberty in rebuking vices. Let him not be ashamed to profess openly that he is an ecclesiastic and a religious, that is, a worshiper of God, a spiritual person, a despiser of the world, a lover of heavenly things." Oof, Cornelius Lapide, he's so good. He goes on to say, "You ask, why does Christ call his apostles the salt of the earth rather than gold or silver or precious stones? I answer, because salt is a thing universally necessary and useful. Salt is, as it were, the balm of nature, which preserves and seasons almost all things with which it is mixed and keeps them from corruption. Thus the apostles were the salt, i.e. the balm of the earth. Salt denotes the office, power, and dignity of the apostles, for salt is the symbol of wisdom. For as salt seasons food and makes it savory, so does wisdom season the mind and make it wise. The apostles, therefore, were salt because they corrected the unsavory morals of the world and made them wise and savory." Think about that the next time the Catholic hospital, for instance, out in San Francisco, is it being corrected as the Lord is anticipated he wants his apostles to do? What about the LA Dodgers for participating in the whole LGBTQ ideology with this hate group that hates Catholics and mocks them incessantly? Are they being corrected? Is the Archdiocese calling for a correction? Are they protesting them publicly, or they just want everybody to stay in their little pew and pray? Think about that in connection to this commentary. He goes on to say, salt excites thirst, so the apostles have excited a thirst for heavenly things. Here, St. Hilary says, quote, the apostles are the preachers of heavenly things, and, as it were, sowers of eternity. They bring immortality to all upon their speech is sprinkled, all upon whom their speech is sprinkled. Going on to say, ye have been chosen by me to cure all the putridity of the world. Ye are the salt of the earth, close quote. But if the salt have lost its savor, if an apostle, if a bishop, if a priest who ought, like salt, to season the morals of others, shall through gluttony, uncleanness, fear, or flattery lose the vigor of his spiritual salt, who shall restore it to him? No one. This may be seen in the case of some of the priests and pastors of the past age, who either led scandalous lives or else were ignorant and negligent in instructing the people who were wandering in or verging upon heresy, whence the ecclesiastical order came into sad contempt, whence the heresies of Luther, Calvin, and the rest sprung up. Who say? Oh my heavens, so many bad things left to say here, but we'll have to pause there. At the end of the day, Cornelius Lapide is reminding all of us that we are to be salt and we are to correct this world in order to save souls. The charity here is in the effort to save souls. Let's never forget that. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. Do you really believe in a secret catching away of the church called the rapture? The pages of your Bible are empty of that type of talk. So here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, solid biblical doctrine is time-tested. This rapture idea got its wheels rolling by John Darby in about 1830. I mean, have you heard of a third coming? You know you haven't. Secondly, God's nature. There's no reasonable premise in Scripture, let alone in moral reasoning, for the results of a rapture scenario such as this. A Christian pilot is yanked, raptured, out of his jet while scores of the remaining passengers who are not Christians violently crash to their death. Meanwhile, said pilot is basking in the presence of God. This is absurd, and believe me, this is preached day in and day out. Thirdly, bad fruit. The preacher at your church says, tonight, don't you be left in that pew alone while that person next to you gets raptured straight up into heaven. That, my friend, is folly with no foundation.
What you're offering and giving to me, you deserve to get back because you're offering more than I can give.
I learned so much through the Stations on the Cross. I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it.
I was attending the chapel and places like that, and through your programs, I was able to find out how other Protestants had come back into the Catholic Church. God bless the Station of the Cross.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
This is Jesuit Father Robert McTague, your daily host of the Catholic Current. Join me on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern to meet Tim Hill of Tan Books. I'm going to ask him who needs old books. I know my answer to that question. What's yours? Don't miss out. Join us on the Catholic Current at 5 p.m. Eastern, coming to you from the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have a conversation with Father Robert Nixon about the spiritual masters. There's a podcast out by Tan Publishing where they're talking about the spiritual works. And in particular, the one we're going to discuss is the Imitation of Christ. This is a work that I'm familiar with because I had to narrate it into audiobook form. And it was literally one of the most painful things I've ever done. It was so hard to get through. in many ways, I felt like this was a sledgehammer to the heart of a complacent age of religious. But was this meant for you and me? Is this meant for laity? Who wrote this? Who was Thomas à Kempis? What is his background? And what is this good for? Especially given the light that we often hear it's the second most sold spiritual work in the history of the world. Like, that blows my mind. We're talking Teresa of Avila, St. Augustine, John of the Cross. There's so many great works. And this is number 2. We're going to have that conversation with Father Robert Nixon at 30 past the hour. Do join us if you can. But there's a book over at Sophia Institute Press. It's called The Coming Christian Persecution. And it's written by Dr. Thomas Williams. And I think this is a great conversation to have. He joins us now, I think, via Rome on video. Good morning to you, Thomas Williams.
Good morning to you. Thank you very much, Joe, for having me on your show.
I appreciate you being here. Breitbart correspondent, and I guess you've written quite a bit for Notre Dame and others. Let's talk about the coming persecution. There's so many questions here that I want to get into, but let's start with the biggest offenders. Atheism, liberalism, Islam. These seem to be the biggest offenders when it comes to Christian persecution. Today, in fact, I'm going to be reading a news segment in the next news break about a young Nigerian priest who was just martyred last week. He hadn't even been a priest a year, and he was shot to death. Nigeria seems to be the hotbed for Christian persecution. Is that the first offender in the world? Is that the greatest amount of Christian persecution we see today?
Well, it is called the country where you're most likely to die for being a Christian. So by one measurement, that's certainly the worst place to be. Some consider North Korea to be worse in the sense that it's completely illegal to be a Christian. You cannot pray. You cannot own a Bible. You can be thrown in jail. You can be killed. You can't talk to someone else about Jesus Christ. So, I mean, the level of persecution driven by that very, very radically atheist government in North Korea is really something to be reckoned with as well. And there are many fewer Christians, obviously, in North Korea than there are in a place like Nigeria, which is like 49% Christian. And yet they suffer at the hands of these radical Islamists there.
I had a conversation, I think it was Friday, with David Ramos from ACI Prensa. Mexico had almost as many priests killed as Nigeria last year. That blows my mind, too. It seems like Mexico, the persecution of the church is increasing, and most people aren't paying attention to it. A corrupt government, the cartels that run many states there where the government almost has zero control. And they see the priest as the means by which to capture command and authority over the people. Kill the priest, who else stands a chance? So I see it growing there. Have you been seeing the headlines there for Mexico?
I have. It's appalling what we've been seeing. This has been going on for some years now. It just keeps getting worse and worse. And as you say, it's kind of the perfect storm against Catholics and against Catholic priests in particular, because you have a very corrupt government, one that's turning a blind eye to a lot of this. And at the same time, the cartels are stronger now than they've ever been in Mexico. Obviously, the people, by and large, are with the church. It's still a very, very Catholic nation and a believing nation. But you're right. I mean, you kill the leaders, you chop off the head, and it's much easier than to have access at the sheep.
One of my favorite early church fathers is Ignatius of Antioch, and he writes his 7 letters to the churches of Asia Minor on his way to being eaten by lions in Rome. It's so epic, it's so epic. But nonetheless, he really is dealing with the Docetist heresy, and they looked Catholic. They had the smells, the bells, they had the vestments, they had liturgies. The one thing they didn't have was the resolve to die as Christian martyrs. They had no issue with offering incense to Caesar or anybody else, and he was really hammering that in his letters. The first to use the word Catholic to describe the church in his letter to the Samaritans. And yet I see similarities today to that time. The church in China, for instance, wants everyone you can have your religion so long as it's completely sanitized and devoid of its morals and theology, so long as it follows the state and our way of thinking, and you offer that pinch of incense to the communist gods, so to speak. Do you see it that way too? And if so, then how can we justify supporting sort of the above ground state official church that is offering that pinch of incense?
And that is a fantastic analogy, Joe. That's exactly what's going on. And I'm honestly really distraught at the fact that we have now allowed priests and lay people to join the Catholic Patriotic Association, which is completely run by the Communist Party and is not faithful to Rome. And we've really kind of thrown under the bus those 6-7 million, we don't have an exact number, of underground Catholics who have held strong despite great persecution, great suffering. They have been unwilling to budge because of their loyalty to Rome and to the Pope. And we really have abandoned them in a very serious way. Now there's pressure on them to kowtow to the government. Now there's pressure on them also to enlist in something they know to be wrong, and which until recently Catholics were not allowed to do, to sign up with this organization that is controlled not by Rome, not by the Catholic Church, but by the Communist Party. And it's very, very distressing. You know, there's another kind of weird analogy you could draw with Christians in the United States and in the West, in the sense that there are kind of two types of Christians. There's one type that is accepted by the mainstream media, that is accepted by progressive pundits as, you know, enlightened. You carry a rosary in your pocket, but you don't protest abortion. You don't stand up against transgender and puberty blockers for children, all these things. That kind of Christian, that kind of Catholic is welcome, patted on the back, great religion, no problem at all by the powers that be. It's only the ones who stand true to the church and to all the moral teaching of the church that are unacceptable. There are those, and that's in a way also, I think, burning incense to Caesar.
Yeah, it's scandalous to so many of the lay faithful how we sit back and see. I mean, where is the statements from His Holiness on the continued persecution in Nigeria or in the Middle East, Pakistan? How many Christians there have been accused of blasphemy and have been imprisoned or martyred, executed? Or what about those Coptics on the beach? You know, it's like in some ways you kind of wish and long for the days where His Holiness might call for a holy crusade. They might call for the Christian nations to come together in defense of persecuted Christians. But who is left to call on? There is no one to call on. And even if he did call, they wouldn't probably come. Do you see that as a part of the world we're living in and getting worse? Because that's your tagline. Things are getting worse on your book, The Coming Persecution, which, by the way, Sophia Institute Press, sophiainstitute.com. We're going to be linking to the book in particular on our show notes today. But do you see that? Like there's no ability to really solve this problem from a geopolitical side of the equation, it seems to me, that only the Holy Father and a holy crusade with all of our spiritual tools could really put a dent in this. Do you think?
Well, I think to do that, we need the will and the backbone to recognize that there's a battle going on. We can't simply make nice, I'm okay, you're okay, we all want the same thing. Our Holy Father has said on several occasions that Islam wants the exact same things that Christian wants. We all want peace. We don't want war. We don't want violence. And yet we know that there is a good swath of Islam that actually does not want that. They want holy jihad, and they believe that it's the will of Allah for them to persecute and slay non-believers. And this is something that they justify not despite their religion, but because of their religion. They can appeal to the writings of Muhammad. They can appeal to the Quran, at least certain texts of it. And so I think we just need to call a spade a spade. We need to be more honest. Right now, I think our failure to do that, to call things out and to say these are not the same. You don't see Christians going out and killing people and cutting people's heads off and saying, praise be Jesus Christ. You don't have that the way you have Islamists saying Allahu Akbar as they are killing Christians. And that distinction is real, and it has to be brought to the fore.
What about comparisons? What if we compare to, say, the 1st or 2nd century, the time of Ignatius of Antioch, who famously, had a conversation with Trajan himself before he was condemned to die by the lions in Rome? What about comparing our time to that time? I know that the last century was incredibly bloody with all of our wars between Nazism, communism, and the like. there was tremendous bloodshed on a scale the history, I think, of the world had never seen before. But what about the martyrs? Are we living in a time where we can compare that? Are we worse? Are we better off? What would you say?
Well, I think in terms of absolute numbers, there's no question. But the population, obviously, of the world, the Christian population, is immense compared to what it was in the first couple of centuries. But Pope John Paul II said very famously, just prior to the year 2000, he said, we're coming up, this is a real time of greater martyrdom than the church has ever known. He really believed that we were entering a new age of the martyrs. And this is something that I think is simply proven and borne out day by day. This is something that we see it. We see it everywhere. And the different drivers of Christian persecution, as diverse as they are happening simultaneously all around the world. And the historic will to defend Christians and defend religious liberty and to stand firm with Christians is waning. We don't see that in the West. The post-Christian West is now part of the persecuting problem rather than part of the defending solution. So yeah, things are getting, they're very, very bad. And I see no signs that they're getting any better in the short run anyway, and probably in the midterm.
We've got it pretty made, we're made in the shade here. We're living the easy life. I mean, we might not like it when someone shouts at us or dislikes our opinions on social media. I personally was shouted at by a angry pro-abortion woman just last week at the Albany Men's March. But that's the worst of it, right? Like for the most part, most of us aren't going to be martyred here, but do you see that changing? Are we seeing a time? Do you anticipate a day and a time in our not so distant future where we might see the same kind of bloodshed that France is experiencing right now, actually, and other countries? Will we see that more here in the United States?
Well, I think that there is a historic trend that one discovers just looking through, as you mentioned, from the very first centuries, but all through ages of great persecution. And of Christians and of others, by the way. You can see this also in the case of the Jews under Nazi Germany, where a group is first ostracized, secondly demonized, as part of the problem, a problem to be solved. So much so that if you do something to put them down, you're actually benefiting your nation and your people. And I think that we're really dangerously close to that point right now, where Christians are called bigots, Christians are called haters, Christians are looked upon as part of the problem, not the solution.
Dr. Thomas Williams, I appreciate your insight and great book, The Coming Christian Persecution, Sophia Institute Press. SophiaInstitute.com is their website. You should check this out. We're going to be linking to it in our show notes over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Thomas Williams, God bless you. God love you. We appreciate you being on the show today.
God bless you too. Thank you, Joe.
Coming up after the break, we have more breaking news and stories. Then, of course, Father Robert Nixon to talk about the Imitation of Christ. It's all coming up next.
Did you know that an unwanted car or truck can make a great gift? When the time comes to purchase a new one, consider donating your old car or truck to the Station of the Cross. We have a quick and simple way for you to get rid of your unwanted vehicle while supporting the solid Catholic programming you love listening to on your radio, online, and through your mobile devices. Whether they run or not, we accept cars, trucks, RVs, boats, and motorcycles. It's a great opportunity for you to give more than you might normally be able to. At the same time, you'll be clearing out space in your garage or driveway, ridding yourself of an unwanted vehicle. Just visit us online at thestationofthecross.com or call 1-866-628-CARS, 1-866-628-2277. May God bless you for your generosity in support of Catholic Radio.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network is dedicated to answering the critical need of access to quality, consistent, professional, and proven Catholic programming. We cannot rely on other media outlets to properly represent our church. Catholic Radio reaches Catholics, non-Catholic Christians, and non-believers alike. As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent of your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported.
Keep up to date with the shows we bring you each day on the Station of the Cross by viewing our programming grid on our website, thestationofthecross.com, and on our iCatholic Radio app. Just click the menu icon in the top left portion of our app and select the link to our programming grid. That's at thestationofthecross.com and on our free iCatholic Radio app for Android and Apple mobile devices.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take. We had some technical glitches there, but we're back. Praise be to God. It all worked out. Let me just share this one story from the news. If I don't share any other one, this one's the most important today. CNA reports Nigerian priest returning from pastoral duties was shot dead. In a statement, Archbishop Augustine Akubizi expressed great shock following the death of Father Charles Agichi, who was shot dead upon returning from pastoral duties in Nigeria's Benin City last Wednesday, June 7th. The Nigerian Archbishop also appealed for prayers for the happy repose of the soul of Agichi, who was ordained a priest less than 1 year ago on August the 13th, 2022, and was serving as the vice principal of St. Michael College at the time of his death. There was other stories, like, for instance, Tucker Carlson surpassing 100 million views on his Twitter feed. Kind of upsetting, Fox News. They sent a cease and desist letter. That's a good time. And then apparently that whistleblower on the Burisma, scandal between the Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Well, apparently he's got 17 audio recordings of all their phone calls, 2 of which go with Joe Biden himself. So good times, good times. Those are your headline news. Can I give a special shout out to our 300 Club members over on iCatholic Radio? Hey, God bless you all. Joining us every single morning, like Joe from the Boston area. I met him at the Albany Men's Conference. So good to meet and hang out with him, get to talk to him. But listens almost every day on iCatholic Radio. Maybe you're listening on the podcast feed. However you listen, we love the fact that you're here, a part of the Station of the Cross family. So thank you for doing that. Be sure to download the iCatholic Radio app in your mobile app store, iOS and Android. Listen to Catholic Radio 24/7, clear as crystal. Get the podcast of this show and all of our programs right in your mobile app, as well as the live video feed and so many other features. Be a part of the 300 Club on A Catholic Take every day by downloading the iCatholic Radio app. We put links to everything on our website, including the app. Just go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Joining us right now, though, is Father Robert Nixon. Good morning to you, Father.
Good morning to you, Joe.
Praise be to God. I'm grateful for your time today. I was watching your podcast series over on Tan Books on YouTube, but you can go to tanbooks.com as well. There's a whole series here on the spiritual masters, in particular talking about Thomas à Kempis and the Imitation of Christ. Now, Father, I got to tell you about, I guess it was about 12 years ago or so, I was hired to narrate The Imitation of Christ in audiobook form. And to this day, I still get a royalty check for my effort. I wasn't that great, to be honest with you. And it was probably the most painful thing I had ever done. Not reading. No, it was just The Imitation of Christ was so difficult because you have to read it like 10 times when you're narrating it into audiobook form. And it was so heavy and it was so big. And I have never narrated another audiobook after that. So, and to see you talk about this in ways that I wish I had access to this kind of information when I was doing that project so many years ago. So let's start by talking about Thomas à Kempis. Who was Thomas à Kempis? I've heard some people say that he was a fictional person. They made him up, that he wasn't real. But in fact, he's a living and breathing person. He is actually responsible for The Imitation of Christ and many other works, was he not?
Indeed. He was definitely a real person. He was born in 1380, I should say, and born of a kind of fairly lower class family. His dad was a blacksmith, and his mum was a village school teacher. But he showed particular talent, particular intelligence, and he was kind of took that as a sign that he was called to the scholarly life. And his first step, though, wasn't to become a priest. He firstly joined an organization called the Brotherhood of Common Life. And this was almost like a kind of lay Catholic association. Yeah. And he really enjoyed that community life. It was kind of like attending a Catholic college. And then he decided after this to enter a kind of monastic community, which his older brother had already entered. And he went into this community and devoted his life to giving people spiritual advice, to copying books. That was a great passion of his, and also to writing his own original books, and the best known of which is The Imitation of Christ. But he wrote a multitude of other works, which largely remain unknown to this day.
Now, is he blessed? I mean, is he on his way to be canonized someday? Does he really have a cause?
You know, this is an interesting question, because he is referred to as blessed. He does have an official feast day. If you look up the Acta Sanctorum, which is like the comprehensive account. But as far as the movement to make him a fully canonized saint, that seems to have gone by the wayside. And I think that'd be a good justification for pushing for that again, and particularly instituting him as a doctor of the church, because a doctor of the church is someone who has taught a lot of people in the faith, and certainly through his writings, he's been a wonderful teacher of the faith. But no, at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a big push for his canonization. And I guess that would, I'm not sure exactly why that is.
Now in the podcast, you discussed a story that he might have been buried alive. Is this true? Is this a legend? Is this just a story, or was there any fact here where he might have been buried alive?
So the story is, people used to ask, why isn't Thomas à Kempis a saint? And the answer which was given was, you know, there was a suspicion that he might have been buried alive and then rolled over in his grave. You know, and because if a person is buried alive, you don't know whether they die in a state of grace or not. But it seems to me that this story is actually a legend, because in the very early accounts of Thomas à Kempis and the writings shortly after his life, there's no mention of this story. And this story only seems to gain currency in about the 19th century. So I am inclined to suspect that it is not really a very solidly based story.
Okay, well, that kind of is very interesting, because if it was sort of made up, I wonder who made it up and what their motivation was to sort of spread a story that would cast doubt upon Thomas à Kempis.
I think the reason was people kept asking, why isn't he a saint? and, someone had to come up with an answer. But the reality is that when The Imitation of Christ came out, it was an anonymous work. And until quite recently, no one's been really sure that it has been the work of Thomas à Kempis. In fact, when readings from it appear in the current Roman breviary, it doesn't give an author. It just says from The Imitation of Christ. So there were another number of other contenders, because he didn't put his name to the work out of humility. And of course, a person is not normally made a saint just because they've written a fantastic book, So, it is, I think he should be made a saint. But of course, at the time, after his death, there wasn't the push for it.
I've also heard, and I've repeated it myself, so I hope it's true, because I guess I've never really fact-checked it, that The Imitation of Christ is the second most popular spiritual work in the history of the world. Like other than the Bible, Imitation of Christ has sold more copies. I mean, if that's true, absolutely, that blows my mind. Even if it was third or fourth, that would blow my mind. We're talking The Interior Castle, Confessions, Dark Night of the Souls. I mean, there's so many incredible spiritual classics. Is it really at number 2?
It was traditionally been regarded as the second biggest selling book of all time after the Bible. And it exists in over, in thousands and thousands of different editions of it. Wow. Now, as to whether today it's still the second best-selling book of all time, I'm not sure. I think probably maybe Harry Potter or whatever might be up there, but certainly in terms of spiritual influence after the Bible, this is one of the very most influential spiritual writings. Of course, as a Benedictine monk, I would say the Rule of Benedict would also rank pretty high in terms of influence because of the millions of Benedictine monks. But the Imitation of Christ is such a wonderful classic, and it's enjoyed by people, interestingly, across all Christian denominations. It's very popular also with readers who are not, in full communion with the Catholic Church of different. So it is a wonderful book, and I think really speaks to the heart, which is what makes it so universal. It's written from this wonderful insight into the human condition, and when you read it, I think every reader just has to recognize that what he says is true. Mm-hmm. What his comments about life, about the human condition, about our own fallen human nature, and about our great need for God is so true. It's just so perpetually resounding.
We're going to get into a network break here in just one moment, and then I want to get into the actual work itself on the next segment. But before we hit the break, you also talked about in the podcast, Thomas à Kempis did he have an apparition or a vision of Our Lady? And what was the nature of that?
Yeah. He did indeed. So according to one of the very early lives of him, he had this great devotion to the Blessed Virgin. But after he entered religious life, it kind of started to cool down a little bit, and I guess he was busy and had distractions. So his devotion kind of, lowered a little bit in intensity. And he had this vision of the Blessed Virgin, and she was going around to all the members of the community of Augustinian canons, as he was, and blessing them all. And she didn't bless him, and he was very upset. And he asked, "Why haven't you blessed me?" And she said, "It's because you've been a bit slack in your devotions." Oof. And after that, he really picked it up. He embraced it wholeheartedly again. And I think probably for a lot of us, we have that experience of sometimes becoming a bit slack in our devotions and needing to be reawakened or re-energized.
Oh, yeah. Boy, that'd be a hammer blow, wouldn't it? When the Queen of Heaven comes to bless everybody but you. That'd be rough. Hold that thought. Father Robert Nixon is our guest. We're talking about the spiritual classic here of Imitation of Christ. It's a podcast series on Tan's YouTube channel, Tan Books on YouTube. We're going to put a link to it, the whole series, so you can see it for yourself at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But coming up after the break, I want to get into the work itself. Who was this meant for? Was this meant for religious? Was it meant for the laity? Everybody? I don't know. We're going to find out with Father Robert Nixon coming up right after this quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Share us with a friend.
Anytime I see millions of otherwise rational people doing irrational things, I look for the demonic element. A blanket of demonic insanity has fallen upon the earth. It is manifested in such things as the all-out assault that has been mounted against the unborn. State legislatures all over this nation are rushing to try to push through laws that will liberalize their existing abortion laws, making abortion legal right up to and beyond the moment of birth. It's also manifested in the surgical mutilation and infliction of puberty-blocking drugs on prepubescent children. It is manifested in drag queen shows in public libraries targeting audiences of elementary school children. It is manifested in pornographic books in public school libraries, in primetime TV shows depicting and celebrating Satan worship.
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Hear what listeners are saying about the free iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Through the iCatholic Radio app, I have listened to the sermons and teachings several times. The effect has been a deeper understanding of my faith and Catholic tradition. This app has truly been a blessing in my life and has increased my faith.
Listen live or at your convenience to your favorite shows. Just search for iCatholic Radio in your app store today.
I'm Jim Havens, host of The Simple Truth, heard weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network.
God so loved the world that he didn't create this committee to sit around in a circle and solicit people's opinions and decide which best course of action to take. No, he so loved the world that he sent his son, the truth. He's the answer. So our faith in Christ gives us the unshaken way to stay Catholic.
That's The Simple Truth, weekdays at 4 p.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. We're having a conversation about Thomas à Kempis, The Imitation of Christ. This is a podcast series put out by Tan Books over on their YouTube channel, Tan Books. You can find it. We're going to link to the whole series for you so you can see it in our show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. But at the top of the hour, we'll say goodbye to the radio audience. We're going to stay on for a half hour of the after show. Producer Jake and myself, we're going to hang out and talk to you directly. Whatever you want to talk about, that's your choice. You get to drive that conversation. And if you fail to do so, we'll simply bring up something from the 1980s to conversate about. So your choice, but your comments drive that in the com box. And you can find all of that on the website at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Father Robert Nixon is our guest. Welcome back to the show, Father. Really fascinating to look at Thomas à Kempis in a way I'd never had before. But let's talk about the work itself, Imitation of Christ. Who was this written for?
Now, this is a very interesting question, and I think it accounts for the great popularity of the book. So it was written for a very general audience of Catholic readers. Now, before the time of Thomas à Kempis, pretty much every spiritual writing had been written basically for monks or nuns or priests, whereas at the time of Thomas, he kind of expanded his potential readership. And this was a time when there was a great reawakening of spirituality amongst the laity, an interest in devotion and contemplation. And so I think he doesn't say exactly who it's written for, but it's clear from certain parts that it's written not just for monks and for nuns, but for people who are engaged in business, in works in the world, even people who are in family life. So it is written literally for every single Catholic. So of course it's very relevant for priests and nuns and monks, but it's also relevant for people who are engaged in the business of the world.
I mean, when I went through it, it really felt like a sledgehammer I mean, it was really difficult. Some parts were very difficult to get through. And I think a lot of people who read The Imitation of Christ, especially non-Catholics, I would argue, who I've shared it with, feel like it's too heavy, it's too harsh, it's too rigid, it's too difficult.
Yeah.
Was he responding to a time? Was Thomas à Kempis responding to a time of great apathy within religious life?
Yeah, he was. And, you know, when modern read this, sometimes his parts about humility and so forth can strike a modern reader as, you know, is this going to damage self-esteem, or is this going to depress people or whatever? But he lived in a different era. He lived in an era when, you know, low self-esteem didn't seem to be a problem or an issue at all amongst people. So he was kind of writing, you know, for people in a slightly different psychological environment. He was also writing in a situation in which people were tending to be, I guess, we live in a situation where people kind of delude themselves with an optimistic attitude about the world, their own, you know, life and character and everything. And so we always say everything is fine. And so when we read this book, it can sometimes strike us as a bit shocking to think, you know, as he so eloquently describes the trials and the failings of our human nature, which I think these days we don't want to face up to. But he faces up to them very directly. And I think this is what people find to be a bit challenging, or to think, you know, is this kind of too heavy? Is this going to be like depressing or bringing me down or whatever? But no, it's not going to do that if you read it in the right attitude. If you read it as something which is very honest and you know, take on what it says with courage and with faith.
Is there anything in the work itself that you felt was like stands out? Like it is like it's the pinnacle, it's the cream of the crop. I mean, what was the best part of Imitation of Christ from your perspective?
Yeah, you know, one of the very best parts, I think, is actually to be found in the very beginning of the book. His contemplations or meditations upon the vanity of the life of this world. And this was something which was, you know, a common theme amongst a lot of writers and philosophers and so forth. But he expresses it so powerfully. And, you know, it's like bringing together the thinking of, you know, St. Paul and St. John and so forth, St. Augustine, but also Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. So he gives us this kind of brand of Christian Stoicism, which I believe is very much needed at this time.
So what's the big takeaway then? When someone goes through this book, and it's, okay, let me ask this question first. How big is The Imitation of Christ? I remember I went through it. It felt like it was never going to end. I'm going to be honest with you. It felt like it was never going to end.
You know, in fact,
well, how big is the work itself?
It's actually a really short book. You know, I have a small edition of it, which is so small I can fit it into my pocket. And I don't know what the word count is, but it's probably something like 30,000 words or something. So it's shorter than a short novel. And it can sometimes seem long because it's so intense, because you read each paragraph and you have to really think about it, you know. That's the thing, but it's not actually all that long. And, you know, I think the takeaway from this is, for everyone who hasn't read the book, read it. You know, even if you're not a Catholic, and I mean, it's probably Catholics who are listening to this show, but even if you're not a Catholic, read it, because it's such an important part of our Western culture, of Western Christendom. The second most influential book after the Bible, you know, and you need to read it. And you can read it, and it's a kind of book you can read, and it might not appeal to you, but then like 10 years later, something in it will come back to you and you want to read it again.
Yeah.
So it's a life-changing experience.
I'll have to read it now from a reader's perspective. Before I was reading it because I was narrating it and trying to get the essence of what Thomas à Kempis was trying to say and the way he was trying to say it. And I just found it very, very arduous. So I'm going to have another take at this. But let's talk about the podcast directly here. So how many episodes in this series? What is it you're trying to really communicate? It seems like you guys... You went into such depth on who he was as a person, which I really found utterly fascinating. But then you talked about the work, some of the stuff we've been doing today, but then you go beyond that. You got St. Bonaventure here. There's so much more here in the whole series. But your part, as far as what you participated in, was it just Thomas Aquinas or Thomas à Kempis rather, or was it more?
I've done this series of podcasts on the Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, and also had conversations about works from Bonaventure and so forth, which I've translated for TAN. And I've got another series of podcasts coming out in the near future on another classic spiritual book by D. Coussard, which is called Abandonment to Divine Providence, which is another...
Oh, yes.
And, what I have to do in these works is to open them up for the modern reader, So some things, if you just read it cold, it can be confusing, or it's like reading Shakespeare without notes to it. You need an explanation to know what's going on, to put it into context. And that's very much what I'm trying to do in these podcasts.
Wow, I'm going to have to come back then to talk about abandonment to divine providence. I like Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. It's one of my favorite spiritual works that I usually read during the Lenten season every year, St. Columbaire. So we'll have to have you back and maybe we can talk about that. But check this out, this podcast series from TAN Books on YouTube. Thomas à Kempis, Imitation of Christ. I'm going to have to reread this now. I feel like the gauntlet has been laid down. I have to read it. Father Robert Nixon, God bless you. Appreciate your insight and enjoyed the conversation today. God bless you. God love you, Father. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Coming up, we're going to have the after show on the live video feed. You can find it over at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. You can find the live video feed there, links to the YouTube and everywhere else. We'll see you there. God bless you and God love you. So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for The Station of the Cross, Joe McLean, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we are clear. Welcome to the after show, everyone. Joe, I can't hear you. Do you have your mic turned off? Something's turned off.
Have I mentioned how much I dislike this setup? Have I communicated that to you in any way, shape, or form? If not, remind me after the show, and I'll give you some clarity on my opinion.
Well, this is the after show, so
it's the after
show.
So
you could give us your opinion right now.
All right, we should. We got to do this we got to do this again from the top. Everybody, back to your positions, please. We can do this better. Right? We can do this better.
We'll do it live.
Alberto, KP Jack 06, Yvonne, good morning to you. Jonas, good morning to you. We're getting trolled over on Rumble. Good times. Praise be to God.
Oh.
Yes.
It's two different, twice it happened.
Yeah. Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. Great opportunities for talking about Imitation of Christ. Boy, it was kind of a humiliating day today. Maybe there's a relationship there between Imitation of Christ and the humiliations that I've been able to enjoy so far this morning. Laura, good morning to you, Laura. She says, good morning from sunny Aruba, Jamaica. Oh, I'm gonna make you. How's the song go? Remember that?
Yeah. I don't remember when it came
Boys?
out, but yeah, that was when the Beach Boys were really ugh.
Still alive.
That was when they were still alive. That was when they were already old.
They were like, It was like when they were breathing.
That's when they were already pretty old, and then like trying to still be teenagers surfing. And it's like, oh, this is just sad and corny.
Yeah, big time.
It's far cry from Pet Sounds.
Says, I'm on vacation with my hubby and father-in-law. I heard that 80% of the population is Catholic. I have not seen any mention of Pride Rainbow, which is absolutely wow.
Nice.
Laura, I'm going to have to go on vacation in Aruba now just because of you. Eileen and T-Storm, good morning. Jack Burton is in the house. Praise be to God. Mike K is here. Glory be to God. Sharon is here. Good morning to you. Good morning, Jen Nugent. Jen Nugent on the team today. Praise be to God. Good morning to you. Glad to see you on the team. I see Damon was here as well. Praise be to God. Says I work from the 1722, then off 2321. I work there. By the way, I posted a picture of the high-end, super professional, top quality broadcasting gear that I destroyed this morning while trying to get set up for the show. I fell off my chair and landed on it.
Sorry, just
I
thought it was a little more like serious.
Are you?
I thought it was a little more serious of a fall type of thing, but just
what is this?
Phrasing it as
the
just
10th grade. All of a sudden,
phrasing it as just I fell off my chair onto it. It's a little funnier than how you originally described it. I didn't laugh at all when you originally described it. That was very sympathetic, but the way you told it now was kind of funny.
Yes, I slipped from my chair. No, Brian Wilson, no Beach Boys. It was just Brian Wilson by himself. Mike K.
No, that the Kokomo or whatever. That was Beach Boys. That was Beach Boys. That was all. That's an all Mike Love song. Brian Wilson was way more talented than to write that whatever that was.
Ouch.
I'm a Pet Sounds fan. I love that album, Beach Boys.
All right.
But
Eric Rodriguez, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Glad you're on.
I know what Mike is saying. Oh, yeah.
Don Paddock, Junior Barra, Rachel Jordan. Good morning to you, Patty. Good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Really appreciate seeing you here. Yvonne and Kilroy Jones. Good morning to you, Alberto, our friend from the UK. Also here, Daniel. Good morning to you. Thank you for chiming in today from China. I think you're saying Canada, but Canada. Greetings from Chinada. Is Canada that bad, Daniel Copeman? Is it lost? Is it a lost cause in Canada? I mean, just because your prime minister happens to look like he could be the son of the Fidel Castro Cuban dictator, not saying I'm endorsing that rumor, just that he looks a lot like him, but nonetheless, is it that bad? Paul was here too, by the way. Paul was chiming in on the YouTubes. Rhaegar82, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Praise be to God. Glad to see you guys on the team. A ton of great conversation. Yeah, today was rough though. The night before, I didn't get any sleep, so I was on pure coffee and adrenaline. Last night, I actually slept, but I feel like it's been the struggle bus is real all morning long, just trying to get ready for the show, falling and destroying my gear. Can you imagine the loud? I'm in a secret location. I think there's people below me. This is like an apartment kind of a thing, an Airbnb, an apartment. And I'm trying to be quiet and respectful. And here I am falling off the chair, making the loudest thud. I mean, good grief. I think even Joe Biden heard it. I mean, it was terrible. 4:00 in the morning, nonetheless. But the show must go on. And then, of course, we're using these links, and I get kicked off my own show. So that was fun, too.
Oh, boy.
Now, did you chime in? Did you pitch in? Did you turn your mic on and go to town?
I was about to do that, and because the news bed was playing, so I was like, okay, well, this is playing. Let me make sure that I can tell Joe where he should
read
go.
The news.
I was about to start doing that, and then you came on.
You should have. There
was no way I was going to be able to read the news and be because I actually started to call you because I wasn't sure if you were seeing my messages.
I know, so I tried to ignore my phone during the show.
Exactly, yeah.
People people are texting me. I'm like, I'm doing a show.
Yeah,
I can't be texting. I can't be looking at texts while doing it. Like it's a hard enough time doing the show under best conditions. Under the least best conditions, it's 10 times worse.
Exactly.
So it's horrible.
Yeah. So
I was like,
I was like, let me make sure that Joe knows what he can be trying to do to get back on, and then I'll jump on. But you actually came on really even quicker than I expected.
I saw some texting activity, but it was only out of the corner of my eye, so I wasn't reading it.
Yeah.
And then I'm reading the news, and I'm like, you know what? I don't hear any music in the background.
Yeah.
I wonder if Jake's trying to tell me something.
Yeah, you think maybe there's potential.
So then I went and looked, and I'm like, oh, great. Thanks. So how many people have read The Imitation of Christ? Raise your hand. Raise your hand right now if you have read The Imitation of Christ. Let me know. And I meant that from a metaphorical point of view. You actually have to put it in the comments because I can't see you.
Here, I'll put
if you
up a
have
poll.
read The Imitation of Christ, put up a poll on the YouTubes.
It's more interactive.
Andrea Lamort, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Praise be to God. Yvonne has a hand raised. Yvonne has read. What'd you think, Yvonne? Did you like it? Was it hard for you? I mean, it was hard for me. I'm going to be honest. Like it was like relentless in some ways. You know, I really felt it was a hammer blow. I want to know if Joe McClain's audiobook is available. No, you don't. It's not good. Can I just tell you, I cringe at the thought of ever listening to it ever. I can't imagine why anybody would ever buy that thing, to be frank. Like I did it. I thought, oh, I could do that. That's no problem. No big deal. I can totally do that. Like, how hard could this be? I had already narrated the letters of Ignatius of Antioch. Of course, you know, I'd gone through radio school. I read on air and all that stuff. So I thought I got this. And then I pulled out The Imitation of Christ, and man, I struggled. Then I got sick halfway through it, and my voice changed. So I struggled to try to make it sound consistent. And then the environment, I didn't have the studio set up that allowed for a very quiet noise floor, which is key for audiobooks. You want a super quiet noise floor. And I didn't really have that. So I wouldn't recommend it. I don't. And it's being sold in Catholic bookstores across the country. There's a company called Catholic Audio Productions that paid me to do it, and they're the ones who are distributing it. And so I get a small royalty check from the very few people who buy it. And I've been grateful for that. I mean, that's always been a blessing to my family, but I kind of feel bad. I feel like I could have done it better. I feel like I could do it better now. But, you know, so anyway, it is what it is. But I've heard way better versions than mine. Way better versions. I kind of want to try another audiobook, to be honest. The noise floor would still be a problem, though. I don't have the quietest space at my home studio, so that makes that harder for sure. But I want to try something more interesting in the sense that, like we're going to reproduce the Lepanto poem by G.K. Chesterton. I'm going to reread that this year, and we're going to produce that with some better quality soundtrack. Jake and I are going to work on that together. That's interesting to me. I like it because there are characters in the poem itself that can come to life based on your inflection, your tone, and all those things. I like that. That's interesting. Whereas The Imitation of Christ is kind of monotone. You know, it's like it's one voice. And yeah, you can inflect here or there, but ultimately it kind of feels a little flat. So I'd be interested to try something a little bit more with dynamism. Does that make sense? I hope so. Hey, Batman Inc. is in the house. Batman Inc., what's your favorite Batman film of all time? If you had to choose only one. If you are stranded on a deserted island, Batman Inc., and you could only take one Batman film with you, which one would it be? Says Batman Inc. says that I'm buying two. If I had to hear my own voice in an audiobook, I'd burn the master copy. It's exactly right. That's 100%. That's 100% true. Bartering. Talk about bartering. Bartering is a great deal. I think bartering would be fantastic. Bartering would totally be the way to go in a world where you are you are not allowed to buy or sell, because unless you sell out to the Antichrist, bartering becomes very, very important, which means your ability to have things that are worth bartering for might be very important. Eggs, chickens, goats, crops, all those things would be amazing. Kellyanne Guest says, good morning, all. Praise be to Jesus Christ. I am the best in my best Joe McClane voice. That's hilarious, Kellyanne. That's hilarious. I tell you what, you guys should do like imitations of me and then like mock me relentlessly and then send them to Jake and then we'll put them on the show. How about that?
The imitation of Joe.
Fun? The imitation of Joe. I like this. This is a great, we should do this like every Friday. We should have someone pretending, to, mock me or something. That'd be hilarious. Rhaegar82 says the Michael Keaton Batman. Rhaegar, you are an old guy. Rhaegar82. Michael Keaton. Do you really like Michael Keaton as the best Batman? Is that seriously your answer? Alberto says Batman movie, Superman 3. Which one was that? Batman Inc. says Batman Mask of the Phantasm. I don't even know what that one is. I don't even know. Like, I have to look that up. Adam West says Lights 10. Is it?
I think so.
I'm gonna have to look it up because I don't know the answer. I guess so. Batman Mask of the Phantasm is a 1993 American animated romantic superhero film featuring the DC comic character. Okay, cool. That's awesome. I haven't seen that one. I don't know what it's like. Favorite actor who's portrayed Batman? Who'd you say, Jake?
Kevin Conroy.
Kevin Conroy.
The voice of Batman from the animated series in the 90s. And then in a bunch of other animated.
Is that the same one as the Phantasm?
Probably. I think so. If it's from the 90s, then probably is. And his voice is just
this
perfect.
says 93.
Yeah, his voice is perfect for it.
Okay, let me narrow the field here. Favorite actor who's played Batman in a movie where you could see his face?
Adam West, of course.
Adam West, boy, you are old school. Look at you go, Adam West. I remember.
Personally, I really like Christian Bale's Batman just because I like Christian Bale. But
Christian Bale is a very capable actor, isn't he?
And honestly, the movies were terrible, but I think Ben Affleck could have been a good Bruce Wayne Batman, like older detective Batman. He could have been great. There were flashes of it, but the movies around him were just like garbage. So, kind of wasted.
Jack Nicholson was an awesome Joker. I agree. Jack Nicholson was an awesome Joker. But okay, what do you think? Because you say Christian Bale. So Christian Bale played opposite of what's his name, who played the Joker, who died of a drug overdose, unfortunately. What was his name?
Heath Ledger.
I can't remember his name. Keith Ledger. Thank you.
Heath.
What do you think of Keith Ledger? Like that movie was so dark, right? Yeah. Like it was so. The nihilistic themes that were going on in that film were so heavy, so dark. So is that taking the comic book too far, or was the comic book that bad? That's the question.
A lot of the comic books that it drew on were pretty dark.
Clooney, right. I forgot about George Clooney. You totally reminded me. I hate to admit this, but I like George Clooney as an actor. His politics is horrible, but I kind of like his, there's something about George Clooney that it's very charismatic and I like. So I think I could get into George Clooney as Batman again. Andrea Lamort says,
Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Schwarzenegger. Get down. I'm going to freeze you.
Stay cool,
You're going to be frozen.
Ice to see you. What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age.
The Ice Age. It's funny. I like that one. That's right. Let's see here. Batman Inc. says, lol, it's really hard to compete with the legacy that is Adam West, though. Absolutely agree about Ben Affleck. Batfleck, yeah. Wasted opportunity. Those films. Bale was good. Heath was a good Joker. Yeah, Heath was pretty good. He was an amazing actor. Like his ability to play that character, being so dark and so brooding. Just I don't know. It's crazy. I guess that is part of the reason why he was a troubled soul, huh?
It happens.
Okay. Junior Barrow saying he's going to mock me by falling off his chair.
That's step one of the imitation of Joe.
Step one of the imitation of Joe. Simply fall off your chair. I can tell you right now that my chair is killing me. I'm pretty sure it's a torture device from the 16th century, Protestant England that is trying to torture on the rack all Catholics. This is part of that implementation. This thing is absolutely destroying my back right now. Andre Lamort says, "I reject Satan and all his evil ways." Yes, amen. Well said. Praise be to God. Val Kilmer. I totally forgot about Val Kilmer too.
Yeah, he was in one movie.
Oh,
I do
we have
like
to have
Val
a
Kilmer
list of all the actors.
as an actor.
I say that about everybody, don't I? I think, is there anybody I've said I can't stand as an actor? Maybe I should start with that list because it's a little smaller. Maybe I'm too easygoing on actors and I like them all. Maybe that's my problem is I just want to like them all. I don't know. Michelle Pfeiffer as the Catwoman. Yeah. What do you think about we did have a Robin. Who was the Robin? Was it Michael Keaton had a Robin? I forget. I remember the actor who played Robin. I don't remember his name, but I remember what he looked like.
It's Chris O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell. Whatever happened to Chris O'Donnell? Danny DeVito played a great penguin.
Yeah, he
totally.
was. That's pretty great.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris O'Donnell. Burt Ward, Sid Lights. Burt Ward.
That's the OG.
That is the OG. My case is I wanted to like Val, but it was not a good role for him.
Well, it wasn't a good movie. That he was just, he had potential.
Best Val Kilmer role ever. The Saint?
Ooh.
Is The Saint the best Val Kilmer role ever?
I really like him.
What do you think the best?
I really like him in Heat. He's really, really good.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. He was great in Heat, but I enjoyed The Saint. The Saint was a popcorn film, right? It was like Born Identity.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Meets John Wick.
I should see that one.
Meets James Bond. The Saint.
97. I should see that. Yeah. Is that based on
That was great.
Is it? Simon Temple. So it's based on the old show.
So
right?
Yeah, he has these identities that are based on saints that he uses to mask his own true identity. It's kind of like Mission Impossible, Born Identity, all this mixed together. It was so good. It was the 90s. It was great. The Saint. I wish there was a follow up to it. There wasn't, but Val Kilmer that's probably my favorite role.
Have you seen the original show?
Too. I've seen clips of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the. It was Roger Moore, right? James Bond, 007.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. Science fiction. Michael Marr is in the house. Stuck in traffic wasn't to come in. Okay, good conversation. Appreciate it. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to take from that, but okay. He should have won an Oscar for that. For what? Doc Holliday. Oh, Mike, how did I forget Doc Holliday?
I forget that? He's incredible in that. that is his
right.
best role. He's amazing as Doc Holliday.
Jake, do me a favor. Write a note after we get off. Have us both fired.
Yeah,
okay.
We're off our game today.
Or at least beaten in public for forgetting Doc Holliday. Because I'm your Huckleberry.
I love that
right?
movie. Yeah, I'm your Huckleberry.
Yeah, that was great.
That's a great movie.
Man.
I love that film.
Top Secret. Yeah.
Top Secret's
coming
funny.
in too fast. Sci-fi Mike. He wants to chime in. He was stuck in traffic and couldn't chime in. Apparently, it was. What is Top Secret? Nick Rivers. What is that? What are you talking about now? Do I have to look that up?
Top Secret's it's a movie from the guys who made. I think they made Airplane. They made. Did they make The Naked Gun? I think it's the same.
Oh man.
Crew, but
yes.
Top Secret, yeah. 1984.
He was. I never saw
this.
He's
pretty funny in that. He's.
Oh man, this is early days.
Yeah, Zaz, Airplane, The Naked Gun.
Top Secret.
Top Secret.
No kidding. Man, I feel bad for Val, basically losing his career, which was pretty cool that Tom Cruise made sure to include Val Kilmer in Top Gun 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he could could have, said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Val, it's just not going to work. You don't have a voice,
Yeah.
But he found a way to include him, and I thought that was super cool. And I thought they did it really well too. So that was awesome. Kellyanne says, random idea. I've always thought a series about a traveling priest where every week someone approaches him at an airport to hear their confession. That is kind of a good idea, actually. Kellyanne, that is super cool. To hear their confession, which is the basis of the week's story. Wow. Okay, Kellyanne, let's take this idea one step further. Okay. What if said same priest, who apparently is in an airport every single week, like somehow is this his mission? Like he's there, like kind of like how the Jehovah's Witnesses set up camp at their like information desk, and they try to pass out their liturgy to you in order to steal your soul away from the good, the true, and the beautiful. Is it like that, where he's like assigned like a chaplain? Otherwise, like, why is he at the airport all the time? He's a traveling priest, so we have to have some good excuse to keep him at the airport, right? Number one. Number two, what if? All right, hear me out now. Don't judge just yet, but what if he was Father Brown? What if those confessions were also like murder mysteries or something? Like we can, like he finds himself at the airport all the time hearing confessions, and it turns out there's a crime or something, and the airport security always need Father Brown to come in and save the day. What if we added that? Would that be a bridge too far, or is it just the confession? What do you think, Kellyanne? Studebaker Hauk. Good morning to you, Studebaker Hauk. How does that square with the seal of the confessional? There it goes. There's the challenge there. Well, I would say this. When it comes to fictional characters, you're writing fictional scenes, there's no real confession being disclosed. So I wouldn't say that would be an issue.
I mean, the best movie ever.
It would be an issue.
The best movie ever about the seal of the confessional, like, shows the confession that's getting,
Yeah. So, I mean, I've seen plenty of depictions of confession in films and whatnot. As long as you're not revealing actual confessions, I think is the key there. And I know in my film that I am, it's a short film, but it's a series that I'm developing. The confession is sort of the crown jewel of Act 2. And so we will be depicting a confession going on there for sure. I like the idea though, Kellyanne. That's amazing. I had an interesting conversation with a gentleman yesterday. I was going to pick up my daughters from Catholic writing camp, and we were talking about screenplays and films and whatnot. So I always enjoy doing that. I have not seen that documentary on Val that Mateus. Good morning to you, Mateus. Mateus, you're up awfully early. Are you in Texas? Because otherwise, come on. Do you really get up this early? He posted a link to the Val documentary that was put out in 2021. I kind of want to watch that. I meant to, and I haven't done it yet. Liz F says, what about the Quantum Priest? Oh man, I loved, what was that television show? About the guy who leaps into people's bodies. What was it called, Jake?
Quantum Leap.
What was that? Was it called Quantum Leap? Yep. I wanted to say it was Quantum something, and I couldn't remember. I never got to see the end. I never got to see the last episode of that film, of that television series. So I actually went back and looked it up. I think it's on YouTube. You can watch it on YouTube. I liked Quantum Leap. I thought it was super cool. That was like
great idea.
That was like good times television. Like television has changed so much. I'm glad we got rid of our television connection. 15 years ago, 12 years ago, whatever it was, Quantum Leap. Like television has changed so much. Like that kind of television is gone. Like it's just gone. Like the 80s, like the Murder, She Wrote, gone. Like this is, you can't get shows like that anymore. Today's shows, they'll take those same themes, but they'll make them more racy, more violent, more gritty, more whatever. But you're not going to get that, like that era of the late 80s, early 90s television shows. They're just gone. They're just, you can't get them anymore. It's sad to me. Quantum Leap. Quantum Priest. Yeah, that's kind of fascinating. That would be kind of fascinating, huh? A priest who somehow finds himself but then that would be sort of anti-Catholic. It would be like against our theology of like, A living person can't possess another person. Like, like a demon can possess a person if God allows it, or the person opens the door to it through mortal sin and permission granted to the demons. But a human person can't possess another person. So that'd be the difficulty to overcome there. An amazing ending, says Sci-Fi. Did you like Quantum Leap, Sci-Fi? I thought it was great. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that series. Matea says, my dog had to go pee and woke me up. I sure it wasn't my falling off my chair that woke you up, because it was pretty loud. I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, you should have seen what I did to my my super expensive broadcasting gear down there. Treat Williams died in a motorcycle accident. Yes, that's right. And talk about an 80s, 90s, television character actor, Treat Williams. Did you guys know who Treat Williams is? Let me do this over here. Treat Williams. Let's see what we find here. Treat Williams. This guy right here. He was in everything. Sci-Fi says, yeah, but it turned out Sam was on a mission from God. Yep, he sure was. So this guy just died in a motorcycle accident. This guy had been in a ton of things. I mean, so many things. Deep Rising, Hair, The Phantom, so many things. Blue Bloods, Chesapeake Shores, that's the most recent stuff. Let's go to the early stuff. Where's the early stuff? Brothers and Sisters, What Happens in Vegas. Yikes. CSI. Did he do CSI? I don't know if he did CSI. I don't see that. This guy's a ton of things. God rest his soul. Who knows the state of his soul upon death. That's the challenge, isn't it? Till death do us part. I saw that one. Night of the Sharks. That must have been great movie making. 1988. Sweet Lies. Echo in the Darkness. Yikes. Dempsey. Oh, yes. I forgot about that one. 1983 on that one. Pursuit of D.B. Cooper. Wow. God rest his soul. Died in a motorcycle accident. Are we prepared to die? Are we ready for that moment in case it happens? I mean, we don't know what will happen, right? We can't know the time. We can only be ready for it. Let's pray for his soul. I don't know if he was ready for it. I have no idea. Tim H. says, Treat Williams was in a really good football movie last year, 12 Mighty Orphans. Oh, that's right. I watched that, actually. Is that the one about the Freemason orphanage, or was that a different one? I think it was that one. It's pretty good. They're trying to get the boys to play football, and they did really well. I'm pretty sure that was it. Katie, God bless you all. God bless you too, Katie. Joe, do you need to add a light on your left side to fade to dark? Yeah, I know. It's the issue is I'm in an Airbnb and I can only bring so much gear. I didn't want to overdo it, so I brought two lights, the splash light and what usually is my hair light. Believe it or not, I have a light just for my hair because I want my bald head to shine and really illuminate. But for simplicity's sake, I'm using it to do just the one job. So we're keeping it simple and we're trying to make it work. The movie Spaceballs. All right, good conversation. Father Brown goes terminal.
The movie
That is
Spaceballs.
hilarious. Father Brown goes terminal. I like that. That's so great. We need a movie voice guy to make these spot. In a world racked with violence and many passengers who beat up flight attendants for not giving them an extra Coke and 7 centimeters of extra reclining space. We're jammed. That's hilarious. Well, you never know. It's possible. It could happen. I think the reality is we need independent filmmakers to make interesting things, and then I think ultimately you can find there's new interesting stories that can still be told, and in ways that I think would both entertain and inform and inspire. Like that's the goal. solid Catholic theology behind entertaining stories, behind storytelling. That's the goal. That would be the goal. Quantum Priest goes terminal. Father Brown in a new epic 3-part series. There and back again with Father Brown. All right, praise be to God, everybody. Favorite Catholic movie? Well, tomorrow, Batman, I guess that will be our conversation tomorrow. We're going to talk about favorite Catholic movies tomorrow. I don't know. I think actually tomorrow we're going to have John Yep on from Catholics for Catholics to talk about the protest against the Dodgers coming up on the 16th in just 3 days from now, and why the Archdiocese is not supporting it. Really? Salt of the earth. We're supposed to be salt of the earth. Also on the program, Joy Mignot from Rome is going to be on, talking about the immigration crisis going on in Europe right now. All of that and more. We'll see you there. God love you.